It was Halloween 2018, and I was 17. This year was special because it'd be my last Halloween living at home before college. I wanted to go all out. My dad, being pretty chill, let me turn it into a 3-day event. The plan was to have a movie night with my best friends, a couple, Martin and Mia, on October 30th, skip school on Halloween for last-minute prep, then host a Halloween party that night. Our attic had just been converted into a sweet hangout spot, so naturally, that's where we planned to watch movies. Getting to the attic meant climbing a narrow staircase, and the light bulb had burned out weeks ago. It was creepy, but perfect for Halloween vibes. Dad made us some snacks, and we headed up around 10 p.m. We just finished watching The Blair Witch Project, and were about to start The Conjuring, which none of us had seen before. I remember pausing the movie right as it started because I heard a weird noise outside. It sounded like something scratching against the house. Martin asked what it was, and I said I had no idea. We waited, and after a minute, we heard it again. I was getting annoyed because it was ruining the mood. Mia suggested we check it out, so we all went downstairs to look out the front window. By the time we got there, everything was quiet. We stood there for a good 5 minutes, but nothing happened. We went back up to the attic and decided to ditch the movie. Instead, we just hung out and talked. Around 2 a.m., Martin and Mia fell asleep, but I was still wide awake. That's when I heard the scratching sound again. I was too tired to investigate, figuring it was probably just the wind or a tree branch. The next day flew by. Before I knew it, the Halloween party was in full swing. The attic was decked out with fake cobwebs, jack-o'-lanterns, and spooky lights. About 20 people showed up, all in costume. My girlfriend Tiffany came as a vampire, and I was a zombie. The party was going great until around 11 p.m. when the music suddenly cut out. I went to check the speakers and realized the power was out. This had never happened before unless there was a storm. I checked my phone, but the weather app showed clear skies. I told everyone to stay put while I checked the breaker box in the garage. Tiffany insisted on coming with me, even though she gets spooked easily. As we walked through the house, I started feeling uneasy. The garage door creaked as I opened it, making Tiffany jump. I found the breaker box and flipped the switches, but nothing happened. That's when we heard a noise from outside. It sounded like footsteps on gravel. I slowly opened the side door of the garage, peering out into the darkness. Our property backs up to a cornfield, and I could see the corn stalks swaying in the moonlight. Something didn't feel right. I was about to close the door when I saw a scarecrow at the edge of the field. It was just standing there, arms outstretched, like always. I shrugged it off and went back inside. I told Tiffany it was probably nothing, just the usual creepy vibes from the cornfield at night. We went back inside and told everyone the power company was probably working on it. People started to leave, and soon, it was just Tiffany and I. We decided to camp out in the living room since the attic was too dark without power. As we were setting up blankets on the couch, a chilling thought hit me. Wait a minute. There's never been a scarecrow in that part of the field. My heart started racing. I ran back to the window and looked out. The scarecrow was gone. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was mistaken about where I saw it, or maybe the darkness was playing tricks on my eyes. But deep down, I knew something was very wrong. I turned to Tiffany, trying to keep my voice steady. I told her we might have a problem. Someone might be out there, watching the house. She looked at me like I was crazy at first, but she must have seen the fear in my eyes because she quickly became serious. We double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows, drawing the curtains tight. Every little sound made us jump. We were both too scared to sleep, so we just sat there in the dark, waiting for morning or for something to happen, whichever came first. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a tapping sound on the window. I froze, remembering the figure from earlier. The tapping got louder, Tiffany woke up, asking what was going on. I told her to be quiet and stay put while I checked it out. I crept to the window, heart pounding. I pulled back the curtain just a bit, and there he was, a man in a scarecrow costume, right outside our window. His face was pressed against the glass, the mask's stitched grin staring directly at me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Tiffany screamed. The man started banging on the window. I grabbed Tiffany's hand and ran upstairs to my parents' room, locking the door behind us. We could hear glass shattering downstairs. Tiffany called 911 while I looked for something to defend ourselves with. All I could find was one of my dad's golf clubs. The gun safe was downstairs, and I didn't know the combo anyway. The house went quiet. Too quiet. Then we heard footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. The floorboards creaked outside the bedroom door. Tiffany and I huddled in the corner, trying not to breathe. The doorknob started to turn slowly, then stopped. There was a pause, and then something slammed against the door hard. The wood splintered. Another slam, and the door burst open. There stood the intruder, his scarecrow mask now askew, revealing glimpses of a real face underneath. He lurched toward us. I swung the golf club, hitting him square in the chest. He stumbled, but kept coming. I swung again, this time catching his head. The mask flew off, revealing a man's face, twisted in anger. He lunged at me, knocking the golf club from my hands. We crashed to the floor, wrestling. His hands found my throat. I could hear Tiffany screaming, the wail of distant sirens. Just as my vision started to blur, Tiffany had grabbed hold of the golf club and smashed it over the man's head. He slumped to the side, dazed. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing Tiffany's hand. We ran down the stairs and out the front door just as police cars pulled up. Officers rushed past us into the house. We sat on the curb, shaking, as more cops and an ambulance arrived. A few minutes later, we heard shouting from inside. 2 officers emerged, dragging a dazed-looking man between them. It was him, the intruder, still wearing parts of the scarecrow costume. Blood trickled down the side of his face where Tiffany had hit him with the golf club. The paramedics gave him a quick check before the police put him in the back of their police cruiser. The police took our statements, and paramedics checked us over too. A detective told us they'd been looking for this guy in connection with several break-ins in the area. They found his car hidden near the edge of the cornfield, filled with stolen items from other houses. The detective assured us he'd be facing serious charges. It was mid-October, and the local haunted house had just opened for the season. I was 16, working the souvenir booth with my friend Laura, who had just turned 15, though she looked older than her age, if you know what I mean. We manned the booth every Friday and Saturday night, plus Halloween. Laura was too young to act in the haunt, so I chose to work with her for company. The haunted house was set up in an old abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, its dilapidated exterior perfect for creating an eerie atmosphere. Our job at the souvenir booth was simple enough, selling t-shirts, plastic fangs, and glow-in-the-dark trinkets to thrill seekers who had just exited the haunt. Most nights were busy but manageable, with a steady stream of adrenaline-pumped customers eager to take home a memento of their scary experience. One particularly chilly evening, about 2 weeks into the season, the crowd had thinned out earlier than usual. Laura and I decided to grab some hot cocoa from a nearby convenience store to warm up. The walk was short, about 5 minutes from the haunted house, along a poorly lit road that wound through a patch of woods. As we approached the store, we noticed the parking lot was nearly empty, save for a red Ferrari at the gas pumps. The car caught our attention. It was a rarity around this neck of the woods to see such a luxury car. Just as we were about to head inside, the guy in the Ferrari called out to us. Against better judgment, we stopped. Right off the bat, he asked if Laura was my girlfriend. Before I could even say a word, she jumped in with a quick, "No," which made the whole thing awkward. She clearly liked him, probably the car and his look. He then looked me up and down and made some comment about how I must be gay, saying he could tell by how I walked and dressed. He tried to make it sound like he was being supportive, throwing in something about how there's nothing wrong with that. But he was right though. I just wasn't out of the closet at the time, at least officially. Then, without missing a beat, he turned back to Laura, saying she was gorgeous and offering to pay her for the night. It was uncomfortable, but the worst part was, she didn't immediately shut him down. She seemed to be considering it, probably because she was attracted to him. He noticed and then offered some free drugs, saying it would make the night even better. That's when I stepped in. I had to talk her out of it, saying it was a terrible idea and we should get out of there. After a tense back and forth, I finally convinced her to walk away. We headed into the store, leaving the guy behind. As we departed, the guy sped off in his Ferrari. The clerk, an older woman, asked what the guy had wanted. We quickly told her everything that happened. As soon as she heard the details, she asked how old we were. When we told her our ages, her face changed, and she said that was all sorts of wrong, and probably something the police should know about. She didn't waste any time, saying she'd call the police right away, and while waiting for the police, she went to the back room to check the cameras. A little while later, the police arrived. 2 officers came in, and the clerk waved them over. They asked us a bunch of questions, what the guy said, what he looked like, what kind of car he was driving. We told them everything. The clerk showed them the footage. They were busy writing everything down and asked if we were okay. After they finished questioning us, they offered to give us a ride back to the haunted house. Upon returning to the haunted house, we alerted security and the ticket booth staff about the incident. The manager, a burly man named Mike, insisted on driving us home that night. Days later, we learned the man in the Ferrari was a known drug kingpin. His erratic behavior was likely due to a botched transaction, leaving him desperate and dangerous. The man was arrested soon after. He claimed he had no idea how young my friend was, saying she looked at least 18, which, to be fair, was true. Though, that certainly doesn't excuse his advances. The incident cast a shadow over the remainder of the spooky season. It ain't just the dead that are spooky. Sometimes people are spookier. I threw my first parentless Halloween party when I was 20. My parents were out of town for the weekend, so I figured it was the perfect opportunity. I invited about 30 people, mostly college friends and a few high school buddies who were still in town. I decided to make it a themed costume party. Superheroes and villains. I thought it'd be fun and keep things from getting too wild. No big groups, no strangers. My parents' house isn't huge, but the basement is finished, so I plan to use that and the first floor. I spent most of October 31st getting everything ready. I hung up comic book posters and placed action figures around as decorations. Nothing fancy, but it fit the theme. I also got some snacks and soda, telling people to bring their own alcohol if they wanted. I knew my parents wouldn't approve, but hey, it was Halloween. People started showing up around 8 p.m. Most were in costume, and I was impressed by how well everyone stuck to the theme. There were a couple of Batmans, a Wonder Woman, some X-Men, and even a spot-on Thanos. I was happy nobody dressed as Superman, with their underwear on the outside. My friend Mike, dressed as Spider-Man, brought his laptop and some speakers to DJ. By 9, the party was in full swing. The basement was dark, except for some orange string lights, and people were dancing and drinking. I was trying to keep an eye on things, making sure no one went upstairs or broke anything. I had a few drinks, but not too many. It was my party after all. I needed to stay somewhat responsible. Around 10:30, I was in the kitchen grabbing more ice when my friend Jess came in. She asked me who the guy in the really creepy clown costume was. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She said there was a tall guy downstairs in a full clown outfit with a mask, just standing in the corner watching everyone. I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't invited anyone who had arrived dressed as a clown. I went downstairs to check it out. The basement was crowded and dark, but I scanned the room. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then I spotted him. In the far corner, partially hidden by the stairs, was a figure in a full clown costume. The outfit was dirty and torn. The mask was old and cracked. It didn't look like a cheap Halloween costume. It looked real, like something a professional clown would wear, but aged and decayed. I pushed through the crowd, trying to get to the clown. As I got closer, he moved, slipping behind the stairs. I followed, but when I got there, he was gone. I asked a few people nearby if they'd seen where he went. No one had noticed him. I went back upstairs, feeling uneasy. I did another walk through the first floor, checking all the rooms. Nothing seemed out of place. I was about to go back to the party when I heard a noise from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps. I hesitated. I'd locked all the upstairs rooms before the party started. No one should be up there. The upper hallway was dark and quiet. I turned the lights on as I went. I checked my parents' room first. The door was still locked, same with the guest room. Then I got to my room. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed the door open slowly and flipped on the light. The room lit up, and right away, I saw him, the clown. He was crouched by my desk, going through my drawers. He turned around, and that's when I realized he wasn't wearing a mask, it was makeup, and the makeup was smeared and cracking, revealing patches of pale, wrinkled skin underneath. I yelled for him to get out. He stood up slowly, much taller than I'd realized. In his hand, he held something. It took me a second to recognize it. It was an old photo of me as a kid at my 7th birthday party, which was held at a park. I remembered the photo well. In the background, there had been a clown, someone who wasn't part of the party. He had pulled the photo from one of my desk drawers. The clown took a step toward me. I grabbed my baseball bat from my room. I backed into the hallway while holding the baseball bat up like a weapon. I shouted at the clown, asking who he was and what he wanted. My voice was shaky, but I tried to sound tough. He stopped for a second, probably not expecting me to confront him. I heard people moving around downstairs. Suddenly, someone shouted that they were calling the police. This seemed to startle the clown. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and ran. He pushed past me and went down the stairs. I followed him to the back door, but he was already gone when I got there. We all went to wait in the front yard to wait for the cops. When they showed up, they looked around the house and yard, but found no signs of the clown. I wasn't surprised. We'd all seen him run off into the night. But I was glad they checked anyway, to make sure he hadn't snuck back in while we were waiting out front. The police took our statements and said they'd keep an eye on the area. My friends helped me clean up, and by morning, the house looked normal. My parents came home that afternoon, none the wiser about the party or what had happened. I never told them. I never threw another Halloween party either. A few days after Halloween, I was cleaning my room when I found the photo again, the same one I'd seen the clown holding. He must have dropped it. I picked it up, studying it closely. The clown in the background was blurry, but I could make out some details I hadn't noticed before. The costume was similar to what the intruder wore, just less worn. The makeup style was the same too. I was about 80% sure it was the same guy, just a younger version. I took the photo to my parents, asking if they remembered anything about that birthday party. It was my 7th birthday. They vaguely recalled a clown being in the park that day. Mom thought he might have been there for another party, since there were several parties being held in the park on that day. I couldn't shake the feeling that this clown, for whatever reason, had come back. But why? And why now? I never found answers to those questions. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for another Halloween to roll around. I've thought about digging deeper into what happened at that birthday party, trying to figure out who that clown was and why he was there. But every time these thoughts pop up, I shut them down like a game of whack-a-mole. The idea of uncovering some connection between that day and the Halloween break-in terrifies me. Yet the questions keep coming back, like right now.